Hello and welcome. My name is Graham Spencer, and I'm a current doctoral student at Belmont University. I'm enrolled in EDL 6210 with Dr. Jim McIntyre, and this video is a pretend video where we'll look at the budget of UMass Boston, and I will be giving a pretend budget speech. It is a case study, so it is not real, and at no point am I speaking for UMass Boston, just in case you happen to stumble across this video on YouTube anywhere. Thank you for joining me here today, and without further ado, I hope you enjoy this budget presentation. Hello and welcome. My name is Graham Spencer, and I'm the president of UMass Boston. Located in beautiful Boston, Massachusetts, we're gathered here today to take a look at the fiscal year 2025 budget. There are 5 things we will take on during our time together today. First, we will look at uniquely UMass Boston, what makes us unique within the UMass system, and why we are important for students across the country. Then we'll look at enrollment trends and projection, followed by looking at the fiscal year 2025 budget before we dive into some specific numbers, before we close with risks and opportunities contained within the budget. So, located on the south side of Boston, overlooking Boston Harbor, UMass's waterfront campus is home to over 13,000 students, including 10,000 undergraduate students, of whom 60% are first-generation college students. UMass Boston takes pride in being the 3rd most diverse college campus in the country. 52% of students speak 2 or more languages. Primarily a commuter school, only 9% of students live on campus in university-owned housing. The university promotes commuter-friendly amenities, including study areas and shuttles to key places. UMass Boston is the 3rd largest member of the University of Massachusetts system. This network of schools spans the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and allows the universities to work together to educate students. As 61% of UMass Boston's operating revenue comes from net tuition and fees, university enrollment is paramount to financial stability for the university. As such, before diving into the finances of the university, it's imperative that we take a look at enrollment trends. UMass Boston is not immune to the nationwide downward trends in enrollment. The number of in-state undergraduate students has dropped each year since fiscal year 2021. This trend is expected to continue into fiscal year 2025. However, enrollment is trending up for out-of-state and international students. These students are also tied to more direct funds as out-of-state tuition rates are higher. After increasing for the past 3 years, the number of graduate students is anticipated to be smaller, and continuing ed students are expected to remain level. As we dive into the fiscal year 2025 budget, we'll start with an overview of key revenues and expenses before running the numbers. On the top left, you'll see the trend of net and gross tuition fees, as well as the tuition discounting. The blue bars represent the full price gross tuition and fees for the university since fiscal year 2020. You'll notice the blue bars are trending upwards each year as tuition and fees increase. However, alongside the tuition and fees increase, the university is also experiencing higher rates of tuition discounting. The gray line is trending up as well, which has led to a very level orange bar, which is the net tuition and fees income. So that's what actually matters to the university. The amount of income the university is receiving from tuition and fees has remained very level. You'll also notice a little higher spike than usual in that gray line as the tuition discounting increases. Later on, we'll talk about expenses and how there has been a shift in the way that UMass Boston qualifies scholarships and fellowships. Prior to fiscal year 2025, scholarships and fellowships were considered an expense to the university, which were equaled out by the increased tuition as revenue. However, beginning with fiscal year 2025, that expenditure has been shifted to a decrease in revenue, ultimately creating a zero-sum balance. But it is important to note as we look at year-over-year budgets. On the top right, you notice the staffing costs of the university. Ultimately, staffing costs have remained about the same since fiscal year 2020. There have been minuscule increases, and they're expected to increase again. You'll notice that the expenses for staff are higher than the expenses for faculty, but both of those are remaining pretty consistent year over year. And then on the bottom right, you will see the non-payroll expenses for the university. These expenses were almost non-existent in fiscal year 2020 and 2021 because of the completely virtual class options for the university. There were no on-campus courses offered during that time, and so the associated costs were very small. You'll also notice in fiscal year 2022, there's an orange block that's pretty significant. Those are COVID-related expenses, and then those really see one more year in fiscal year 2023 before weaning off and becoming either rolled into the normal operating budget or no longer relevant due to the progression of the pandemic. As we dive further into some numbers, we'll talk about some specific elements of the fiscal year 2025 budget. You'll notice there's stagnant income from tuition. That tuition received amount, that net income received, is pretty stagnant year over year. And that matches well with the highest cost of the university, salary and benefits for faculty and staff. We are seeing increasing expenses per student, but that is balanced by decreasing debt overall. Between fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025, overall debt for the university is anticipated to shrink by about 14%. Overall, the university sees 2% operating margins, which is right on par with many similar universities, which equivocates to an $11 million surplus for fiscal year 2025. This budget does present some risks and opportunities to the university as a whole. First and most important, the declining enrollment is something the university needs to keep our eye on, as 61% of the operating income comes from student enrollment, tuition and fees. So if we see a further drop in enrollment, we may have to make some adjustments. We also rely as an institution very heavily on grants, and those grant funds are in other people's hands, whether it is state funds, private funds, or the federal government. We're in a very rocky situation right now where we don't know necessarily what will happen. And that goes hand in hand with our last risk. As we're seeing an increase in international students, which is seeing an increase in those higher direct funds of out-of-state tuition and fees, we are concerned about the potential for students to lose their student visas. We, of course, will look to support our students in any way we possibly can, and we will walk alongside them and try and problem solve with them, but it may be something that is out of theirs and our hands. Of course, there are some opportunities this budget presents as well. We are located just south of the main city of Boston, still within the city limits, which is a growing city. It's very popular, and we're attracting more people to this city. And so college is the perfect time to go to a new city, explore. And being a commuter campus, we're able to allow students to immerse themselves in city life while also getting an education. We can also work harder to increase our online enrollment, providing more online options for students and additional course offerings online, and then work to increase our graduation rate. Currently, our graduation rate is relatively low, with a 6-year graduation rate for incoming freshmen. And if we're able to match our retention rate year over year, it's currently in the mid-70s for freshmen being retained in the sophomore year. If we're able to further that retention rate into graduation rate, we'll be able to increase our income from tuition and fees as students will enroll for more courses so they're able to finish their degrees. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at graham.spencer-oral@bruins.belmont.edu.